We're back with another episode of the AC Podcast, first of 2021. Oh my goodness, there's just so much to get into. Another special edition episode featuring my woeful, disappointing Philadelphia Eagles exclusively, because I got a lot to get into. The other podcast episode, I'll get into everybody else. I just realized at this point that the Eagles just need a separate episode of their own, because I cover so much with them, and their dysfunction that, it eats up a lot of the podcast. So, you guys can hear about everything else on the other episode. But there's a lot to get into. A lot of news broke over the weekend. A lot of stuff happened since I last was on. The Eagles lost to the Cowboys. Thank goodness. So they were eliminated from playoff contention. Then they lost to the Washington football team in embarrassing fashion. What a disgrace that was. Eagles have the number 6 pick. Doug Pederson's coming back. Roseman's job is safe. Jim Schwartz is stepping down. Carson Wentz reportedly is going to request a trade. There's just a lot. There's just a lot of stuff to get into with this team. And there's so many layers to it that I just have to break down. So, let me just dive right in. Let's just start with Doug Pederson, I guess. Let's start with him since he's returning. And we'll just break this down layer by layer, however it goes. So Doug Pederson's returning as the Philadelphia Eagles head coach. In my estimation, he should have been fired. And I get it. That may be a little hard to say. Maybe a little tough to stomach for some people. It's like, how can you fire the guy after he's made the playoffs 3 straight seasons, including winning a Super Bowl in one of those seasons, and now you're trying to fire him after one bad season? Well, Doug Pederson looks like a flat-out unprepared coach. He looks like he's been caught up to as far as his scheme and his offense. Looks like he's losing the locker room with his decisions against the Washington football team. And it looks like no one's developed under his watch. That's what it looks like. That's what it appears for me, at least. I mean, we talk about the Dallas Cowboys game. Doug Pederson just does some questionable things. We talk about settling for a tie against the Bengals instead of trying to kick a field goal. You talk about 0 for 9 on third down against the Giants coming out of a bye week. You talk about these questionable fourth down decisions. And let's get to this Cowboys game for a minute. This guy punted on 4th and 8 at the Philadelphia 49, but then he goes for a 4th and 15 at the Dallas 33. Like, where? It's like he has no sense of like what to do in the game. It's like he can't make in-game decisions. Why would you go for a 4th and 15 instead of kicking a field goal? And then you don't go for a 4th and 8 at the 49. Like, where are you getting these informed decisions from? Either you just don't have any knowledge of the game situation, or you're actually getting these decisions from your coaching staff, which are both equally bad. So we do that. And then you talk about the nonsense, the stunt that he pulled on Sunday Night Football on national TV. I don't get why the NFL flexed this game. It was just a complete waste of time. I get it. You don't want Dallas and the Giants to know whether the division's already been wrapped up, so you flex the Eagles game to the 8 o'clock game. I get it. But my goodness, that was a disgraceful game. The Eagles did. Jalen Hurts was 7-20. Nate Sudfeld, God bless his heart, he was thrown into the wolves, and the Eagles were clearly tanking. Doug Pederson, I mean, the Eagles deactivated they only went in there with like 40 some odd players because they deactivated all the key guys, deactivated Carson Wentz, deactivated Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert, just a slew, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox. They just deactivated a slew of guys. It was just utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. And so you factor all that in, and then you throw Nate Sudfeld in. Obviously, the Eagles had no chance of winning with that guy in the game. Just no chance whatsoever. And you factor that nonsense in there. And then I hate when people mention this. Let's go back to Doug Pederson's record, right? Because people like to bring up, he has a winning record with a backup quarterback. That's all great and everything. But guess what? Because QB wins and all that other stuff, there's a lot of things that go into a win in the NFL. So if you're telling me that stat matters, he has this winning record with a backup quarterback, and he's so much better without Carson Wentz than with Carson Wentz, then talk to me why Mitchell Trubisky has a winning record in the NFL, yet no one thinks he's a franchise quarterback. Oh, no one wants to talk about that now. No one wants to talk about that. Okay, I thought so. Cool. So we bring that into the equation, and then we talk about the demise of the Philadelphia Eagles the last 3 seasons. Do people realize in 2018 this team started 4-6? Like, give me a break. And in 2019 they were 5-7, and then this year they're 4-11-1. And people are talking about there's been no regression. Now, sure, the Eagles went 9-7 2 of those seasons, and then the 13-3 season with the Super Bowl in 2017. But the Eagles leave themselves no margin for error. And yes, the team they play for, Doug, that's all great and everything. But this is not an elite team. The talent, this team is bereft of talent. Just bereft of it. It's appalling. And we're going to get to High Roseman because this guy, his press conference, it just appalled me. The nonsense and the stuff he's trying to sell to this fan base, and we're not buying it. No one is. And why would anyone? This is a 4-win team, and they're talking about no major change. Like, there's no major change. Like, Doug's not getting fired. Howie's not getting fired. Jim Schwartz is going to be a scapegoat, and we're going to get to that. Carson Wentz, he's going to be a scapegoat. We're going to get to that as well. But you're talking about the Eagles are 23-27-1 since winning the Super Bowl. This is not a good football team. This is a losing football team. Like, what are they talking about? Yeah, you made the playoffs the last 3 years because you play in the worst division in the league. And you came in last in the worst division, one of the worst divisions in NFL history. You came in last. And you don't think there needs to be sweeping changes? People are saying, oh, well, it's the pandemic. It's the pandemic. The Eagles were the only team that returned their entire coaching staff, and they came in last. Dallas fired their head coach and their coaching staff. Washington fired their coach and their coaching staff. The Giants fired their coach and their coaching staff. Every team had to deal with no OTAs, no off season. And yet there's 8-10-win teams in the AFC. The Dolphins missed the playoffs because they lost to the Buffalo Bills. And you look at the teams in the NFC, there's about 4 or 5 teams in the NFC that have double-digit wins. And people are going to continue to tell me that this is a good operation. The Eagles have a good winning culture, that these guys deserve to stay. How could you make that argument? These dudes were ill prepared in a pandemic season, and all 32 teams had to deal with it. They weren't the only ones. And injuries are not an excuse. I'm sorry. This team is not good. Even at full strength, what are they maybe? 7-9, 8-8? Sure, that wins the division, but then we go through another season where the Eagles are oblivious to the problems they have, and they mask it with a playoff victory, a playoff appearance, a playoff berth. There's a reason the Eagles are in this position right now. It's because they were a mess and they didn't recognize it. And these dudes, they have no foresight. So how can you trust these dudes with no foresight to fix this? And we're going to go through all this. But you just look at Doug Pederson, it's just questionable. And then he was calling plays for Jalen Hurts. He's getting him all these open reads, easy reads that he wasn't doing for Carson Wentz. It's just it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And then when you're talking about Doug Peterson's offenses, let's remember the quote. Let me bring in the owner into this because we got to get to him as well. There's too many layers to this. I got to break it all down. Let's talk about what Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, said on August 23rd of 2020. This was his quote. "We always have the belief as an organization that you want to be a top 5 offense to have your best chance of winning the Super Bowl." Okay, he knows what he's talking about there. The Chiefs and the 49ers had top offenses. The Eagles, the year they won the Super Bowl, had a top offense. Patriots, when they played them, had a top offense. Rams, when they went to the Super Bowl, had a top offense. Bills are Super Bowl contender this year. They have a top offense. Packers are, the number one seed. They have a top offense. Chiefs, we already know what they do with Patrick Mahomes, the Ferrari. So we know this is an offensive league. It's a passing league. So let's talk about Doug Pederson's offenses. 2018, 18th in points per game, 14th in yards per game. 2019, 12th in points per game, 14th in yards per game. 2020, 25th in points per game and 22nd in yards per game. This is a good offense to you people? In 2019, let's remember, Carson Wentz was playing with scrubs. So he was making the offense look better than it was supposed to. Playing with Greg Ward, Deontay Burnett, Robert Davis, Josh Perkins. So Carson Wentz really made that offense better than what it was. So let's remember that. And then you get to the DVOA of the offense under Doug Pederson. 2016, they were 20th. 2017, when they won the Super Bowl, they were 8th. Okay. 2018, they were 16th. 2019, they were 14th. And then 2020, they were 29th. What good offense is... What? Where is the good offense? This guy looks like he's been caught up to. He's been figured out. Where did this stuff doesn't add up to me? How can anyone with a sound mind and make an argument that Doug Pederson has a good offensive mind? He's not Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Andy Reid. He's not Eric Bieniemy, Brian Dable on the Buffalo Bills. Like, what? Where is the offensive innovation? Where is the scheming at? And you can't figure it out with a more talented quarterback on your roster, Carson Wentz. This doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. And then you factor in, and then you go back to the Washington game, and a report came out that Eagles players and coaches were shocked by Doug Peterson's quarterback switch from Jalen Hurts to Nate Sudfeld, which resulted in sideline confrontations. 2 players had to be held back from going after the coach. A few more measured ones questioned him. So now the Eagles have brought this guy back, and players in the locker room are going to be questioning him because of his move to bench Jalen Hurts in the fourth quarter with 12 minutes left in the game. Now, I get it. Jalen Hurts looked pathetic. He was 7-20, so no one's going to make an argument that he should have been in the game, but he scored the only 2 touchdowns in the game. The Eagles probably would have won the game if he stayed in there, so thank goodness they pulled him. I'm happy the Eagles had the 6th pick in the draft, but my goodness, if you were going to tank the game, just start Sudfeld. Don't put Jalen Hurts in there because you embarrassed him on national TV. And what's his thought process supposed to be now? What do you think that Jalen Hurts is going to think of you when you pulled that stunt? And now the locker room is siding with that stunt, or siding with Jalen Hurts rather, and his mentality that we wanted to win the game. What do you think that does to Jalen Hurts if he's going to be the quarterback on the roster next year? Now, they can always rebuild trust and whatnot, but why would you want to trust Schwartz Roseman and Doug Pederson? Why? If they backstabbed the $100 million man, why wouldn't they backstab the 2nd round pick? I've already said it. Why? What makes people think they wouldn't do that? You think they've learned from the error of their ways? They don't even know there's an error. They are oblivious to the fact of what they've done to cause this dysfunction. They're oblivious to it. That is the funny part in it all. They're oblivious to the fact that they've caused dysfunction. Isn't that funny? Does no one else see that? No one? Because when you look at this stuff, it's just amazing that we've reached this point. It's just really appalling. How are you going to win back the locker room? How are you going to have more credibility in the locker room? How are you going to win back over the locker room with veteran defensive players in there, with Jalen Hurts? How are you going to do that? This operation, it made no sense. And I think, as far as the tanking is concerned, I think that was a higher-ups decision. I think that was Jeffrey Lurie and Schwartz Roseman telling Doug Pederson to tank that game. He just tried to do a little favor for his buddy Nate Sudfeld, who's been on the roster for 4 years. And if Nate Sudfeld was so good, wow. Doesn't it say something that Nate Sudfeld looked like a guy that doesn't belong in the league anymore? And he's been on the Eagles for 4 years, and they claim they're so good at developing quarterbacks, and he looks like a scrub? What does that say about you? You've had this guy in your system for 4 years, and he looks like a scrub the minute he gets into the game. Looks like he doesn't know what he's doing. Looks like a deer in headlights. You got dudes letting free rushers onto him. Just all types of stuff. It's just, you got Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels clowning these dudes, talking about some, I just couldn't do what the Eagles were doing. I just don't get it. This stuff is unbelievable. And this is the coach that people want to come back. And we haven't even gotten to the part where he's broken Carson Wentz. We haven't even gotten into that. Carson Wentz is good on rollouts. You don't roll him out the pocket. Easy reads. You get all these easy reads for Jalen Hurts with him reading half the field and stuff. And I get it. Carson Wentz is a 5-year starter. He's not a rookie. But but you know what's so funny? I've seen Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay with quarterbacks with lesser talent coach these dudes to 300-yard performances that result in wins. Jared Goff won a game and threw for 300 yards this year where he averaged 3.8 yards per attempt in the air. 3.8 air yards per attempt, excuse me. Jared Goff threw for 300 yards. Let me say that again. Sean McVay coached Jared Goff to a win and a 300-yard performance through the air, averaging 3.8 air yards per attempt. Kyle Shanahan coached Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard and Jimmy Garoppolo to 300-yard performances and wins. And none of those guys are considered the talent that Carson Wentz is. And yet Doug Peterson can't figure out a way to scheme anything open for Carson Wentz. He can't figure out a way to use him and maximize his strengths. He can't figure out a way to do that. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And this is the coach that y'all want to come back. Wow. Appalling. Now we get to this from the Carson Wentz angle. Because Howie, it's going to take me all day to get through his nonsense and his disgrace. Now we get to this from the Carson Wentz angle. Carson Wentz, he played like the worst quarterback in the league, obviously. We don't need to continue to highlight everything that he did. One of the most turnover-worthy plays. Off-target percentage was disgraceful. Completion percentage, 57. Touchdowns and interceptions, leading the league or tied for the league lead as far as interceptions. You just talk about all this stuff, and it's disgraceful. And I'm not here to excuse Carson Wentz. I'm really not. There's nothing to excuse as far as his poor play is concerned. Because when you look at it, sure, the weapons weren't that good. The offensive line was that good. Some of the sacks were on him. He had poor ball placement on some balls. He had some terrible decisions. Just all types of stuff that you don't want your quarterback to be doing. And he lost his confidence. He started, when he was getting pressure, he started looking at the rush and doing all the things you're not supposed to do as a quarterback. And he looked like a shell of himself this year. And it was disgraceful. So I'm not here to excuse him. But what I am here to do is add some clarity and some context. Because if you're Carson Wentz, why would you want to stay in this failing operation? If it's true that the reports are true, and I don't believe it, first off, because no one's talked to Carson Wentz's agent. No one has talked. No, they have no sources. Neither Adam Schefter nor Chris Mortensen, who are putting out these reports, have said that they haven't spoken with Carson Wentz's representation. So what conclusion can we draw from that? Who are the only other people that could be giving this information out? The Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman. And it's a beautiful job because they do this before every Sunday game, so they have information to talk about, so the national media can disseminate this information and manipulate the public into thinking that Carson Wentz is the enemy. So he's being called selfish, he's being called salty, he's being called not a team player, he's being called all these things. You even have ESPN, Mike Greenberg, saying that Carson Wentz is a $100 million man. He wasn't out there on the field with this team. And there's literally footage of him during the game sitting down on the sidelines, walking around on the sidelines. You have people questioning the fact that he was not on the field. When he was deactivated, number one, he's a healthy scratch. And number two, the cameras literally showed him. When have you ever known the cameras to show a guy who's not playing, who's not even dressed? Like, why is he relevant? Carson Wentz wasn't even the backup on Sunday. Nate Sudfeld was. Why are the cameras being put on Carson Wentz when he's not even playing? Beats me. But when you look at that, the Eagles are obviously leaking this information because Carson Wentz gets no benefit from it. He gets none. What benefit does he gain? And he didn't speak to the media either for exit interviews. But what benefit does Carson Wentz gain from speaking? And what benefit does he gain from leaking information? Because whatever team he's going to go to, then they're going to look at that information and say, oh, he's not a team guy. He's not a locker room guy. He's a malcontent. Of course. But what do the Eagles gain? Obviously, all the heat comes off of them. Obviously, they get to exonerate themselves. And then you talk about the fractured relationship with him and Doug Pederson. If that's true, and the Eagles say they want to repair that, and if let's think about this for a second. The Eagles most likely haven't talked to Carson Wentz yet, so they don't even know whether he wants to stay or go. So they throw that information out there for other teams to poach, so they can get other teams interested. Because everybody knows the Eagles got to trade Carson Wentz. If they're going to trade him, they're going to have to trade him at a certain point. But either way, if he's on the roster, $33.8 million. If he's off the roster, $34.6 to trade him. So either way, the Eagles are going to be in a predicament, one way or another. So you throw that out there. You start building up the trade interest, letting other teams know that he's available and he wants out. So you do that. But then behind closed doors, if he wants to stay, you can always manufacture and fix the relationship and no one will ever know. And all they'll say is, and all the Eagles PR will do, Howie Roseman will do is, if they repair the relationship with Carson Wentz, oh, see, we had some issues, but we worked it out. It was nothing major. We just had a few things that are misunderstandings and everything goes away. They can spin that. They can spin it just like that. But the national media, they're falling for these ploys and these manipulations by the Eagles and their front office. And it's very laughable. But the Eagles fans aren't fooled. So it's okay. They can be fooled all they want. But the Eagles fans, they're not fooled at all. But if you're Wentz, why would you want to stay? And they're leaking all these lies about you. The relationship. Clearly, these people, they don't believe in me because if they did, they want to draft a second round quarterback. You failed to surround me with talent and weapons at the skills positions. Offensive line is in mass disarray. Why would I want to stay at this failing operation? Why would I want to stay in this dysfunction? Well, what benefit do I gain? You haven't shown me that you're committed. Yeah, sure. You can say, oh, you've poured draft picks and, all this and given me a contract extension. But the next step after that, once you decide that I'm the guy, is surrounding me with talent and resources. I say this once again. Any team that has a franchise quarterback, they've surrounded them with weapons. And I'm not talking about the older guys. I'm talking about the young guys. Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Henry. Austin Hooper, Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin in free agency, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Josh Allen. They got Stephon Diggs for him. He looks like an MVP candidate. Deshaun Watson came into the league. He had DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, had a 1,000-yard rusher last year before he had this, terrible supporting cast this year. Still play like a top 10 quarterback. Kyler Murray, they got DeAndre Hopkins for him. Christian Kirk, drafted a tackle in the second round. Andy Isabella, Kenyon Drake, Larry Fitzgerald. You talk about Jared Goff. He's had numerous weapons over his career. Brandon Cooks, Todd Gurley, Sammy Watkins, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. You talk about Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Zeke, top offensive line. I'm just saying. And you talk about Carson Wentz. Don't even get me started on these guys. Bryce Treggs, Dorial Green Beckhams, Paul Turners, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jacksons. These dudes barely play, yet they're the third and sixth highest cap hits on the team. You're talking about, Zach Ertz, he's a reliable weapon. Dallas Goedert, he's not used nearly enough. Miles Sanders, they don't give him over 20 carries. So, what are we doing here? And then what else are we talking about? J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's a scrub. Robert Davis, Deontay Burnett, Greg Wards, Jalen Reagor, come on, man. Travis Fulghams, Richard Rodgers, Jason Crooms, Hakeem Butler, his only snap. Another coaching gaffe by Doug Pederson, going to Hakeem Butler against the Giants on a 4th down. And his only snap in his NFL career, still to this day. You just talk about this stuff, and you can't make an argument that any of these guys are good. None of these dudes are Pro Bowl caliber players. None of these dudes have had a 1,000-yard season since Carson Wentz has been a quarterback. Come on, man. What quarterback would be successful with these weapons? Can someone please tell me? Anyone, please. Ask a fan question. Respond in the chat. Somebody, please tell me who'd be successful with these types of weapons, man. Because I just haven't not seen this. You talk about even Torrey Smith and Mike Wallace's, John Hightowers and Quez Watkins, 5th and 6th round picks. Come on, man. This is a joke. It's a joke. You can't make an argument for this stuff. And so now we're in this predicament where we don't know if Carson Wentz is the quarterback. And what's even worse is we don't know if Jalen Hurts is the quarterback of the future. We don't even know that. Jalen Hurts, I'm not sold on him as the guy. And how could you be? He's a 52% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 9 fumbles, and he has 63 rush attempts for 354 yards and 3 touchdowns. I don't know any franchise quarterback that's going to be there's no franchise quarterback that's completing 52% of their passes. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, they don't even know the playbook for him. He's only reading half the field with a bunch of flood concepts, a bunch of sail concepts, a bunch of speed outs, and all this other stuff. He's reading half the field. He doesn't throw it over the middle. They don't open up the playbook. And there's either one of two things. Either Jalen Hurts is not ready, or they just don't think that he can do it. Because what was he doing those other previous 12 weeks in practice that they didn't decide to open up the full playbook to him? So that's alarming right there. Either they don't trust him to do it, or they just haven't gotten to the point where they want to give him that part of the playbook yet. Both are, which are not good. So you have that going for you. You have, according to Pro Football Focus, Jalen Hurts leads all quarterbacks in uncatchable inaccurate throw percentage at 28.8%. Carson Wentz ranks second at 25.5%. Bad throw percentage, Jalen Hurts 23.3. Carson Wentz 21.9, fourth worst. Jalen Hurts was the worst. On target throw percentage, Jalen Hurts the worst. 63.8, Carson Wentz 70.4, fourth worst. This isn't to get on Jalen Hurts, but if you're turning the keys over to this dumpster fire to Jalen Hurts, this passing offense is broken. So whoever's playing in this offense, it doesn't matter. Jalen Hurts got sacked 6 times against the Arizona Cardinals. No one talked about it, but he got sacked 6 times against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm just saying. In 4 games, he got sacked 13 times. 3 times per game. 3.1.2, whatever. No one cares. But irregardless, the offensive line is still bad. The receivers are still bad. This offense is still not good. Regardless of the quarterback change, regardless of whether you have Jalen Hurts or Carson Wentz in there, the offense is still broken. And that falls on Doug Pederson once again. And people keep telling me that, people keep saying this, and it just doesn't make sense to me. People are saying, oh, Carson Wentz, that was the anomaly, his 2017 season. So it's funny because his pass rate and completion percentage went up in 2018 and 2019 respectively compared to 2017. And let's just keep that thought. Carson Wentz, his 2017 season was an anomaly. So that means he's never developed under Doug Pederson. And if he hasn't developed under Doug Pederson, why would you trust Doug Pederson to develop Jalen Hurts or any other quarterback with this broken offense, with what I just described? Why would you trust him? Now, in fairness to Doug, he can only work with what he has. The GM has severely screwed him, obviously, with these weapons and everything. So I can give Doug a pass for some of this stuff. But let's just keep this all the way clear. If Doug was one of these elite coaches, he would have got this team to 7-8 wins. Because if we're just comparing my other favorite team, Mike Tomlin, when he didn't have Ben Roethlisberger, he still went 8-8. This guy has been 14 seasons in the league without a losing record. So even if you take away Ben Roethlisberger in some seasons where he's gotten hurt, the worst Mike Tomlin's going is 8-8. Doug Pederson, if he was such a magnificent coach and he could do all these things, he would have gotten this to at least 6, 7, 8 wins. I'm not saying that's what I wanted, but I'm just saying if he was one of those types of coaches, he took the talent he was given and made it arguably worse or just as bad as it would have been. Like, let that sink in. He took the talent he was given. He didn't make it better. He made it as good as it was or worse. Neither of which are good. And people want to tell me this is stellar coaching. He's clearly regressed since the Super Bowl. If you want to talk about Carson Wentz's regression, let's talk about Doug Pederson's. He doesn't have a winning record since the Super Bowl. 23, 27, and 1. Playing for ties, throwing game-deciding touchdowns to Hakeem Butler. 0 for 9 on third down out of a bye week. A game you had 2 weeks to prepare for against the New York Giants. The Suddenfield Jalen Hurts thing. His handling of Carson Wentz and the play calling. Like, what are people seeing from him? The passing offense is broken. They're 29th in DVOA. How can you make a sound argument that this is good coaching? And then you talk about 6 false starts against the Giants. You went scoreless in the second half against the Dallas Cowboys, one of the worst defenses in the league. Like, no. No. You can't make an argument that these dudes are good at their jobs. You can't make that argument. At all. Dude looks like he's been figured out. And the Eagles fans, they're not falling for it either. Prominent people I follow, as far as reporters for the Philadelphia Eagles, put out polls of whether they want the Eagles to keep Carson Wentz, Doug Pederson, Schwartz Roseman. 60% of the fans want the Eagles to keep Carson Wentz. They had a quarterback vote. Do you want Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts, Zach Wilson, or Justin Fields? Because obviously no one's getting Trevor Lawrence except the Jags. 60% of the people said they want Carson Wentz. No, the Eagles fans aren't fooled and bamboozled by Jalen Hurts and what he's done. He's looked good in stretches, but he isn't like a franchise quarterback right now. And it's hard to evaluate him, honestly. But come on. And then 95% of the people want Schwartz Roseman gone. Most of the people, not even 95% of people want Howie gone. A substantial amount of people want Doug gone in these polls. No one's happy that these two dudes are back and Carson Wentz and Jim Schwartz are going to be the scapegoats. This season wasn't all on bad quarterback play. There was bad coaching across the board. I just named it. And now we get to Schwartz Roseman, the GM. And what he's done, not listening to scouts as far as Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. You haven't drafted a Pro Bowl. You drafted one Pro Bowler in your last 50 picks, and it's the guy that you're trying to that reportedly wants out of here, Carson Wentz. And you're telling me this guy's good at his job? And let's get to this Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson thing, because this thing just really annoys me. This guy, this guy said they didn't pick Justin Jefferson because they were looking for players they needed. Aren't you supposed to draft the best player available? Once again, Daniel Jeremiah had Justin Jefferson rated the 14th best player and Jalen Reagor was the 56th. Let's go to number 2 point. The Eagles needed wide receivers. They didn't just need a speed wide receiver. They needed good wide receivers, period. So knowing that, now we get to the evaluation process. Let's look at the players. They're both wide receivers. Okay, now we can compare them. Schools, Big 12, SEC. Which one's more NFL ready, most likely? SEC. Check. Let's go check Justin Jefferson. Let's go to speed. Jalen Reagor ran a 40 time that was slower than Justin Jefferson's at the combine. Check Justin Jefferson if you're looking for quote unquote speed. So check Justin Jefferson. Quality of competition. Justin Jefferson was in the national title game playing against other SEC opponents. Jalen Reagor, the only quality opponents they play in the Big 12 is Oklahoma. Check Justin Jefferson. Now let's go to the other part of the evaluation. The traits. Jalen Reagor's only trait that his best known trait is his speed. Justin Jefferson's is route running, ability to get off press coverage, separation down the field, contested catches, big play potential. Jalen Reagor, punt return, speed, not known as a good route runner, hands were severely questionable, does not stack corners and get separation down the field. Not a big catch radius, he's only 5'10". Quality of competition was severely questionable. College production doesn't match up with Justin Jefferson's. But the Eagles evaluated Justin Jefferson and said he was a volume slot player. Well, that shows me you don't know how to use players. You don't know how to use talent. Because Dick, as much as I bag on Nelson Aguilar and his viral sensation and all this stuff, it's really funny to me that Nelson Aguilar, while he's had some drops this year still, he looks like a completely different player with the Las Vegas Raiders than he ever did with the Philadelphia Eagles. So either A, that means Nelson Aguilar, no. That just means that you didn't know how to develop Nelson Aguilar or use him correctly. That's all that means to me. That means your coaching staff did not know how to use him. Which is an indictment, again, on Doug Pederson and his coaching staff. So we get to that. Then we talk about what he said as far as trading Carson Wentz, as if he's ruled out trading Carson Wentz. He did not give a yes or no. He said that's not anything we're talking about right now. Right now, you're not talking about it, but you will be soon because your season's over. So soon you will be talking about whether you want to trade Carson Wentz. They try to sell us this stuff like, oh, we believe in him. Oh, we plan on keeping him, all this stuff. And it's like, he's like fingers on my hand. I can't imagine him not being a part of me. What are you talking about? What? What are you talking about? You went and chose another quarterback instead of getting us some help. In the 2020 NFL draft, the Eagles had needs at wide receiver, at corner, at linebacker, at safety. 4 other needs, and he chose a quarterback when they had just signed one to a $128 million contract extension 10 months earlier. What are we supposed to do with that? And you're talking about this guy's like fingers on your hand. You can't imagine him not being a part of you. It's like this stuff, it just doesn't make sense. And then when you're talking about what he said in regards to Jalen Hurts, because he was asked a question about Jalen Hurts. He said, I got to skip through some of it. But he said 2 teams are playing for a playoff berth with their backup quarterbacks. As we go towards 17 games, depth is important in this league, and I think that's an important position that you're trying to find depth. And certainly a guy that we liked as a player. Then he's asked again about it. Of some of the things that I've done this season, I certainly regret the comment about the quarterback factory. Yeah, of course you do. Because that's an idiotic statement. Here he goes again. Really, it was just in terms of how the importance of the position around the league, the importance of the position to this organization, and really a reflection of our experiences with backup quarterbacks when we did that. So you don't even think Jalen Hurts is a starter. You drafted him to be a backup. Once again, I say this. How valuable is a backup in the second round when you're trying to get immediate contributors on your football team? The Eagles have this. They have this. Oh my gosh, man. This is so frustrating to think about. They have this illusion in their head, this faulty process in their head that a backup quarter, since they won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback, they can remanufacture that. That was luck. That was luck. Nick Foles has not proven to be able to do that anywhere else in his career. Never. He's not even a starting quarterback in the league. He's not. And you're talking about benefiting from the backup quarterback position. No, you haven't. No. Nate Sudfeld is not good. He's been a backup. What benefit have you gotten out of him? The only person that's benefited from that relationship is Nate Sudfeld. He's been stealing money from you, sitting on the bench doing nothing but holding the clipboard, holding the tablet. What are you talking about? Chase Daniel, he was a backup. What benefit did you get out of him? Except he was stealing money. Again. Most likely, once again, if your starter goes down, your season is over most likely. It's over. If your franchise quarterback goes down, your season is over. If Patrick Mahomes goes down, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. Like, what? Your season is over. Hell, even Jimmy Garoppolo, he went down there. The 49ers season is over. So what are you talking about? Like, they have this. They just been fooled and bamboozled by the fact that they won a Super Bowl with a backup, so they continuously think they need to pump resources, very valuable resources and assets into the quarterback position, in the backup quarterback position, and it's not the case. It's not. The backup quarterback position is not that important because if your starter goes down, it's over. You're not a Super Bowl contender if your starter goes down. You're not. You're just not. That Super Bowl was luck. And let's talk about the faulty way that you built that Super Bowl team. Because it wasn't a sustainable way of success as far as team building. Most of the contributors were free agent acquisitions. Nigel Bradham on the defense. Ronald Darby via trade. Let's talk about Chris Long. He was a valuable contributor on the defense. Patrick Robinson was one of the best slot corners that year. He hasn't been good since. You talk about who else was on that team. There was a free agent acquisition because that was mostly what it was free agent acquisitions. You talk about Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount contributed to the number 3 rushing attack in the league. Alshon Jeffrey was a free agent acquisition. Torrey Smith, a free agent acquisition. You got the best year ever. You got one of the best years of his career out of Nelson Aguilar after he was rated the worst receiver in the league 2 straight seasons and was leading the league in drops. The whole offensive line was elite that year. Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Sayamalu, Peters before he went down, and then Vitae filled in admirably. Like, this stuff, it just doesn't, it's not adding up to me. You can't just build a team through free agents, and most of those guys were veterans. Those guys were old. You have to have a good mix of draft and veteran free agents, and the Eagles don't have that. And then you won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. I left him out. My fault. And then you won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles as the backup after Carson went down and he already got the team the number 1 seed. So you wouldn't even have that Super Bowl without Carson. Because there's no way Nick Foles could lead anybody anywhere. So you just think about all that and how they won the Super Bowl. It was luck. It was luck. Anyone can have one good year. Anyone can have a good magic carpet ride. But there's staying power in the ones that know how to build a team that's sustainable for success. This team isn't built for success. You have questions about who the quarterback's going to be. Your wide receiver position because you're going to get rid of Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. You have Jalen Reagor and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and he says, we're counting on those 2 dudes to progress. He said that in the press conference. What? Your receiver room is shot. You have Greg Ward. Your receiver room is full of Jalen Reagor, who is not Justin Jefferson and will never be because he's not a star. You compare Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson's stats. Jalen Reagor, 31 receptions, 396 yards, and a touchdown. And Justin Jefferson, 88 receptions, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's never going to be a star like Justin Jefferson. I'm sorry. Then you get to J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. This guy is a scrub. He's a scrub. He was a healthy scratch for how many weeks? He was a 2nd-round pick. And you chose him over DK Metcalf, over Terry McLaurin, over A.J. Brown, over Deebo Samuel. Stop. Then you talk about who else is on the team next year that's going to be on the team. Oh, Greg Ward? Guy he can't run after the catch. What is he going to do? A former college quarterback off the practice squad? And then you talk about Quez Watkins and John Hightower. Those are your receivers? That's what you're going to bring Jalen Hurts into? Because you can't bring back Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts together. My plan, if you're asking me, is bring back Carson Wentz, fix him, but that's not going to happen because you had to fire Doug to do that. I don't trust Doug. Carson and Doug don't work together. So that's already off the table because Doug's coming back. So Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback next year. Or, I'm going to give my other thought of what I actually think is going to happen now that he said what he said about Jalen Hurts, because clearly they don't think Jalen Hurts is a starting quarterback because he compared it to a backup when drafting him. So they obviously don't think Jalen Hurts is a starter. And how could you make an argument he's the starter? Completing 52% of his passes. 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That's not franchise caliber quarterback stuff. It's a 4-game sample size, so you didn't have enough sample size. But even then, I think at this point, going off the information I have, they need to let Jalen Hurts play. They got to give him a full offseason, give him all the first team reps, and let him prove whether he's a franchise quarterback or not. They got to draft Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. Draft the receiver in this draft because Doug Pearson's offense is not going to do anything without dynamic talent at receiver. Jalen Hurts can get out of harm's way as far as the offensive line. Lane Johnson's coming back. Brandon Brooks is coming back. Andre Dillard, oh my gosh. He's not that good, but you can slide. If Jason Kelce retires, you slide Isaac Seumalo in from guard to center. You slide Dillard in from tackle to guard. And then you put Jordan Mailata out at tackle. That's really all you can do as far as the offensive line. And then you have to wait another year to address the offensive line. You have to adjust the receiver position now. You have to. You have 2 generational dudes, Devontae Smith, who's most likely going to win the Heisman, and Jamar Chase, who to me is the best receiver in the draft. One of those dudes is going to fall to you. And then you have Jalen Waddle, obviously. One of those 3 dudes is going to fall to you at 6. And you have to choose one of them. You have to get a receiver for this offense. This passing offense is pathetic. And it has no dynamic receivers on it. Jalen Reagor is a gadget guy. That's what he looks like. He looks like a Paris Campbell. I'm sorry. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson. DK Metcalf. It's so frustrating to think about. And then when you think about all this, and then when you think about the drafts, because Howie Roseman tries to say, you don't get rid of guys. We've only had one bad moment. Let's talk about your really bad moments because you've been the GM since 2010. Brandon Graham, okay, good. Nate Allen, Daniel Teo, Nisham, Trevard Lindley, Keenan Clayton, Mike Kafka, Clay Harbor, Ricky Sapp, Riley Cooper. He was a scrub for many years. Charles Scott. Like, what is this? I'm not even going to go through this nonsense. Let me just go through the current drafts. 2017, Derek Barnett, he's not nearly good enough for the price you paid for. He's not nearly good enough for the price you paid for a defensive end. He's supposed to be an elite edge rusher. He's overrated. He's not good enough. Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas, Mac Hollins, Donald Pumphrey, and a legendary running back class. Shelton Gibson, Nathan Gary, Elijah Qualls. None of those guys are on the roster anymore. Only Derek Barnett is. You talk about Jalen Reagor. He's not good enough. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson. I'm sorry. Davion Taylor. He can't even get on the field. He's a project linebacker. Kayvon Wallace. We don't know what we have there. Jack Driscoll, I actually like him, but he got hurt. He was out for the rest of the year. John Hightower, Sean Bradley, Quez Watkins. Those are fifth, sixth. Like, this guy, he isn't hit. Like, there's no stars on this team anywhere. And people are saying the quarterback has to overcome this. You saw what Deshaun Watson did. Did everyone see that? He played like a top 10 quarterback, and it did not matter. They were a 4-win team. They were 4-12. So was Deshaun Watson supposed to overcome that? Was he supposed to overcome that? Because that's all people tell me. You're getting paid this amount of money, you have to overcome. Well, Deshaun Watson played like a top 10 quarterback, and the Texans went 4-12. So it's obviously more about the team and the roster. The same thing with Carson Wentz. I don't believe if he played any better, this team would be any good. I really don't, because the roster stinks. It really does. There's no good safeties on the team. The cornerback position opposite Darius Slay is no good. The slot corner position is no good either. The Eagles completely neglected the linebacker position altogether and just hosed that position entirely. Defensive tackle spot, you have 3 dudes getting paid top 25 contracts. Like, and then you talk about the Pro Bowlers this year, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Jason Kelsey. Those are all dudes from the Andy Reid era. Howie Roseman didn't draft those guys. So you just look at this stuff, it's just ridiculous. You got the nerve to say, oh, just because you have one bad moment doesn't mean you're bad at your job or you have a bad process. Yes, you do. Your process stinks. For an organization that claims they're so forward thinking, they're behind. You're behind. This is a passing league. You have no corners or wide receivers. You don't invest in a linebacker position. Oh, people are saying linebackers aren't worthy of top 10 picks. Have you not seen Roquan Smith go in the top 10 and he's one of the best linebackers in the league? Devin White for the Tampa Bay Bucks went number 5. The Steelers trade up to number 10 to take Devin Bush. What are you talking about? A linebacker is not a top 5, is not worthy of a top 5, top 10 pick. What are you talking about? People just don't know what they're talking about. And these are the same people in the Eagles. They completely neglected linebacker position. If they had Devin White, Devin Bush, Roquan Smith, you're telling me this defense wouldn't be a little bit better? Like, give me a break. This doesn't add up. It's like, you talk about team building. These dudes don't know how to build a team. It's a passing league. They don't surround the quarterback with wide receivers. It's a passing league. They don't think they need corners or linebackers that can play coverage or safeties. Like, where do they think the allocation of resources are only supposed to go? The offensive and defensive line? Like, my gosh. These dudes are behind. They're not ahead. They're not forward thinking. They're not ahead of anything. They're behind. And they continue to make numerous mistakes in the draft. And the team suffers because of it. These dudes, they're not savvy. They're not smart. They're not forward thinking. How could you make that argument that they are? These dudes are numbskulls as far as I'm concerned. Howie Roseman knows nothing about football locker room dynamics. He invites dysfunction into the organization by drafting Jalen Hurts. You keep dysfunction around by keeping Alshon Jeffrey around after he bashed the quarterback on 2 separate occasions. You don't even know how to tank correctly. You should have just started Sudfeld the entire Washington game instead of putting Jalen Hurts in there and embarrassing him and making a mockery out of him. And now players are questioning your head coach that you decided to keep. And then we get to this Jim Schwartz stuff, and the Eagles probably weren't going to bring him back. They probably called him into the office, said, "Hey, Jim, we thank you for your services, but we're not going to renew your contract." And it was an easy way to say, and it was easy for Jim Schwartz to say, "Oh, I'm taking a year off, or I'm possibly mulling retirement." But come on now, man. You know what the Eagles did behind the scenes. Don't be fooled. Don't be bamboozled. Don't be hoodwinked. Don't be had by these by these national reporters and these dudes who don't know what they're talking about. Don't be had. We know what the Eagles did. Come on now. And I'm not opposed to Jim Schwartz being relieved of duties. I'm really not. He wasn't the worst offensive coordinator, but the Eagles can certainly do better. They can also do a lot worse. I will say that. They can also do a lot worse, but they can also do a lot better. This year, well, overall, in Jim Schwartz's time at the Philadelphia Eagles for 5 years, the defense ranked 8th in expected points added per play. He had 2 top 5 DVOA finishes and never finished lower than 17th. And then you talk about the amount of investments the Eagles made into the defense. Not nearly enough. The Eagles, all their money is allocated on offense. It's not allocated on defense. Like, Eagles have had 11 top 100 picks in the last 5 years. 8 have been spent on offense. They have the 3rd most expensive offense in the league. They rank 28th in offensive DVOA. It's like I've been saying. This team is not going to be good if they're an elite defense. They're going to be good if they're an elite offense. And they're far away from that. The offensive system is broken as far as Doug Peterson's scheme. And all these offensive, whoever these people are, senior offensive analysts, pass game coordinator, pass game analyst, get these dudes out of here. Get them out of here. It's a disgrace. The Eagles need an offensive coordinator, and they need a young dude with some fresh, innovative ideas from college. They need someone. Go get that dude, Graham Harrell from USC that you tried to get last year. Make him the offensive coordinator, man. I don't care if he's going to get hired a year later. Who cares? Or is like, come on. Well, we need something new. We need something fresh. Because this thing is broken at the core. And how can you trust these guys to fix it? How? When Howie Roseman neglects the scouts, isn't this what the scouts are paid to do, is tell you who to choose over the other? When I broke down my evaluation of Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson, I gave you college production, quality of competition, conference that's more NFL ready, pro system, speed, hands, route running, stacking the corners, knowing leverage. I gave you all these parts of the evaluation process after the fact that, okay, these are both wide receivers. And we know we need wide receivers. Now we break down who's the better player. Who does more things better at the position as far as the nuances? Catching the football, like I said. All those things. The scouts told him, Justin Jefferson, he went with Jalen Reagor. The scouts told him to choose Jeremy Chin, a safety, who, if he was on the team right now, that would have solved another need. He chose Jalen Hurts because of the experience of the backup quarterback, the success they've had with the backup quarterback here, which other than Nick Foles is not much. You keep relying on the past to make decisions for the future when you need to be forward thinking and seeing things in the future. That's your job. Why would you trust these dudes to fix it? Staff members are frustrated their evaluation of players isn't weighed in personnel decisions. You talk about the Eagles being $73 million over the cap, and then you factor in Carson Wentz's $34.6 million cap when they trade him. You know, it's bad to the point where Jake Elliott missed a 32-yard kick and it's $8 million to cut him. I mean, this is what the GM has done. He's destroyed the team. He's destroyed the team. Literally destroyed the team. And people are for keeping this infrastructure in place. How? Why? What evidence do we have that you can get this fixed when you've torn it to shreds? You invited dysfunction. You don't listen to the scouts whose job is to tell you and help you differentiate who's the better player at a position that you need. You're on the self-preservation wave where you survive all these power struggles. And then we get to the part where you fire Doug's coaching staff year after year. So Doug's not even an empowered head coach. He's a puppet, is what it seems like. How can we have any trust in you? How? What reason should we? Why should we believe in this current regime? 3 years after the Super Bowl, we're talking about dysfunction. We're talking about a team that does not have a franchise quarterback potentially. We're talking about a team that has no young talent. Let's evaluate the young talent that's on this Eagles roster. The quote-unquote young talent. Miles Sanders and Dallas Goedert are the two best players as far as the young talent. Neither of them have a Pro Bowl. Then you get to Jordan Mailata. You get to Josh Sweat. You get to Alex Singleton. Who else? Who else is a foundational piece? Jalen Reagor because he's a first-round pick? You get to Jalen Hurts, I guess. Like, who? And then you get to Derek Barnett, but only because he's a first-round pick. So I give you those 8 guys. None of them have combined for those guys combined for 0 Pro Bowls. And the 2 with the most Pro Bowl potential are Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders. And they're underutilized. Those are your top players under 20, under 25, 26, 27 years old. That's your young core. And you guys trust this regime. How? Where is the talent at? Where is the evidence? This guy brings up, we've won 35 games the previous 3 years. Give me a break. Give me a break. This is a 4-win team. This is a 4-win team. And the only scapegoats, the only people that are getting any significant amount of blame are Jim Schwartz, who they've underinvested in the defense as far as draft compensation. Even though Jim Schwartz does have a heavy amount of leverage and say in as far as his personnel because he's the quote unquote head coach of the defense. So some of that can be attributed to him. And Carson Wentz, they're blaming him as well. The guy that they continuously leak reports about to make themselves look better and to increase his trade value. People want Carson Wentz to come out and deny the reports. What benefit does he get from doing that? Because people are just going to twist his words and excoriate him anyways. So it's better for him to just remain silent. Carson Wentz and his agent have said nothing, which is the smart thing, honestly. Because the minute they say something, it's going to be spun one way and it's going to sway teams away. That's exactly what it's going to do. That's exactly what the national media is going to do. So Roseman has left this team with no young talent. The cap situation is it's in hell. You talk about the mismanagement. You talk about him not listening to the scouts. Now the Eagles are limited in ways they can acquire. They can't acquire any talent via free agency unless it's some bargain bin guys. So you can't participate in 2021 free agency in March. The only way you can acquire talent is the draft. The one area where you are terrible at your job at because you've acquired one Pro Bowler in your last 50 picks, and that's Carson Wentz, who you're trying to trade. Like, how have you left the roster how have you left the organization in this much of a mess? You're limited in how you can acquire talent. You're over the cap for next year. You're the second most expensive roster, and this roster has 4 wins. You're not listening to the scouts, and you're not a football guy at all. They are. You're from law school. And the one thing that you're well renowned for, cap, we're over the cap. And we're going to have to take a bigger cap hit to get rid of Carson Wentz. This doesn't make any sense. These dudes they're not good at their job. They're not qualified. They're just not. These dudes are not qualified. I'm sorry. They're just not. Doug, I'm sorry. He had his moment in the sun. It was really nice. It was really good. Oh my goodness. And here we go with another report. Miles Sanders. Nobody liked QB switch. Running back Miles Sanders says Eagles players were not in favor of decision to bench Jalen Hurts for Nate Sudfeld on Sunday night. This is a prominent player. This is one of the young players. This isn't one of the veterans. This is one of the young players on the team. And Miles Sanders wasn't even playing. Ooh, the Eagles, they're going to be in a bunch of trouble. So now you've kept this head coach, and now players aren't on board with the decisions that he's made. This isn't good. This is what dysfunction looks like. This is exactly what it looks like. But they invited this. If Jalen Hurts wasn't on the roster, no one would be talking about benching Carson Wentz for Nate Sudfeld. No one would have said that. The offseason would have been the only thing the Eagles would have been talking about the offseason is fixing Carson Wentz, getting him some more weapons, getting him some more help on the offensive line. That would have been the discussion with the number 6 overall pick. But here's what I think is really going to happen. And then I'm going to get to Jim Schwartz before I close out. But here's what I think is going to happen. I think the Eagles are going to draft a quarterback. And I say that because of what I previously said when I read the quotes about Jalen Hurts. They think he's a backup. That's essentially what Hire Roseman is saying. That's essentially what he's saying. Let's read it again. Really, it was just in terms of how important. No, let me start again. This is a question when he was asked about Jalen Hurts, why they made the selection. Really, it was just in terms of how the importance of the position around the league, the importance of the position to this organization, and really a reflection of our experiences with backup quarterbacks when we did that. That's what he said in regards to their selection for Jalen Hurts in his press conference to end the season. So that tells me exactly what they think of Jalen Hurts. They think he's a backup. And how can you make an argument he's a franchise guy when he completed 7 to 20 passes? Well, he's completed 52% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for the season, for the 4-game stretch. How can you make the argument? You can't. So this is what I think the Eagles are going to do. They're going to find a way to possibly trade up to get either Zach Wilson, Justin Fields. They're probably already in position to draft Trey Lance. That's probably what they're going to do because they have no answer at quarterback currently on the roster. So thus, they're going to miss out on Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith because their quarterback situation is in disarray. And I don't trust them with this quarterback either. How could I? How can you trust this regime? How can you trust Hire Roseman and Doug Pederson with another quarterback? Another one? You drafted one with the 2nd overall pick in 2016. You broke him. You draft one, and you contributed to that by drafting Jalen Hurts, and you screwed Jalen Hurts over and embarrassed him on national TV. The players don't agree with that. Doug Pederson is going to have to fix that. And now you're most likely going to draft another quarterback? You haven't learned. You don't know how to develop a quarterback. Carson Wentz hasn't developed on your watch, according to people. If his 2017 season is an anomaly, he hasn't developed under your stewardship. You have no innovative schemes. You don't have an offensive coordinator. Carson Wentz is the more talented guy. He has a lot more arm talent. You realize that this is the funny thing. The way the national media talks about Carson Wentz and the way league execs and front office people think of Carson Wentz are two totally different things. People in league offices, front office execs, they think Carson Wentz is still a top quarterback. They think he's in one of the worst situations in the league. So Carson Wentz is going to have suitors. The 49ers most likely are going to be interested. We already know the Colts are going to be interested because Phillip Rivers is retiring. Drew Brees, he's retiring. The Saints could be interested. The Denver Broncos, they have good weapons. They could be interested. I mean, those are all good situations to go to as far as I'm concerned. You talk about the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, number 1, a slew of running backs, a good offensive line, good young receivers, the best tight end in the league. You talk about the Indianapolis Colts, the best pass blocking offensive line in the league, good stable of running backs, and they have a ton of cap space. So if they trade for someone like Julio Jones, acquire someone in free agency like Chris Godwin, they're right there. Then you talk about the New Orleans Saints. I mean, do we need to say any more about Sean Payton? Come on now. Their offensive line is good. Their defense is good. They have offensive weapons. Sean Payton's one of the best offensive minds in the league. And then you talk about the Denver Broncos. Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant. Good offensive line, good running backs. That's a beneficial situation as well. So when you're looking at those things, why would I want to stick around here? Why would I want to stay here? Those are all beneficial situations for Carson Wentz as far as I'm concerned. But you're looking at that, I just think the Eagles are going to draft a quarterback. That's me reading between the lines. I don't know for certain, of course. It's just my opinion. But reading between the lines, I certainly think that that's what they're going to do. If Jalen Hurts, they view Jalen Hurts as a backup. I already told you what my plan is. Now that I have information, Doug Peterson's coming back. Howie Roseman's returning. I think you got to give Jalen Hurts the keys and figure out if he's the franchise quarterback. And then if he's not, draft a quarterback in 2022. You'll have $80 million in cap space at that point, but is what it is. But that's what I think they're going to do. They're going to try to get up, take Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Zach Wilson. That's my opinion of what they're going to do. Until I see otherwise on the draft or, whatever. That's what I believe they're going to do. After all, they invest so much into the quarterback position. No one's gotten more out of the quarterback position than the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's that. But before we get here, I want to get to this Jim Schwartz stuff. I've talked about a lot, obviously. The current infrastructure in place. Howie Roseman, Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson. I've talked about this stuff ad nauseum, honestly. Players going against Doug Peterson right before my very eyes as I'm doing this podcast. But like I was saying before about Jim Schwartz and him being the fall guy, I certainly think the Eagles can do a lot better than Jim Schwartz. But they can also do a lot worse. Jim Schwartz, he was a little stubborn, stuck in his ways, wanting to run cover 3 and cover 1 exclusively. Some stuff mixed in here and there, but not really a versatile defensive scheme. As I said earlier, one of the a defensive scout said, what the Eagles are going to line up in. They don't really disguise, really. So, not really where the league is trending. Another example of the Eagles not being innovative and knowing where the league is trending and adapting to the modern NFL. So when you look at that, I think they can certainly do a lot better, but I don't have any names off the top of my head right now. But when I look at someone like Brandon Staley for the Rams, right? He's very innovative in his approach. Very, very innovative in what he does with their defense, which is a stark contrast to what the Eagles do. So let's get into that for a second. So with Jim Schwartz's defensive scheme, it's all predicated on the front four, penetrating one gap, getting up the field. So that's why the Eagles invested so much in the D-line, obviously. Neglected the linebacker position, neglected the secondary because, well, when the defensive scheme is at its best, the defensive line is getting pressure with its front four, rotating in, having a deep defensive line. But when the defensive line does not get home, that exposes the secondary. And while they won't say, of course, that, we know it to be true. The Eagles can be had if they don't get pressure with the front four, which was a problem in 2018, was a problem in 2019 with Ronald Darby and Jalen Mills on the outside, and has been the problem this season when they haven't gotten home, although they are top 5 in the league in sacks. But beyond that, when you hear Jim Schwartz, whenever you heard Jim Schwartz talk in the press, post-game pressers, and the defense didn't perform up to stuff, he said, we just got to get more pressure with the front four. But he's not really much of a blitzer. Not really. Like I said, his scheme is very direct. Cover 3, cover 1, rush the passer with 4. Not much blitzing. If he does, he telegraphs it with cover 0 blitzes. Not very innovative, very stale, very predictable. very rudimentary, all that stuff. But then when you compare that to Brandon Staley, a guy who operates in more two high shells, he's from the Vic Fangio defensive tree, so more two high shells, more combo coverages, more multiple in their fronts, unders, overs, odd fronts as well. Obviously, he can do a lot of things with Aaron Donald in that front up front. Then you think about the coverages on the back end. Like I said, a lot of two high shells, cover 4, cover 2, some combo coverages, moving Jalen Ramsey in the star position, having him shadow number 1 receivers. You look at all that stuff, and even how they fit the run. The Eagles and the Rams fit the run very differently. Obviously, the Rams are daring you to run, and they'll fit it with two high shells. Most of the time, cover 4 because you can still stop the run with those two high shells. It's just a lot harder. But the Eagles are more of a +1 in the box type of defense where they're going to rotate their safety down into the box, obviously what cover 3 and cover 1 does. And they're always going to fit the run with, +1 in the box and try to dare you to throw it. But the problem is, the way the league is trending, it's more efficient to throw it than run it. Obviously, you'd prefer not to put the ball in the air in harm's way. But that's where the league is trending. Like I've been saying all podcasts, it's a passing league. So, the Rams, they'll dare you to run it. You can go ahead and try to double, triple team Aaron Donald. Other guys will get off one-on-ones. The Eagles, they operate the opposite way. They'll put their defensive line down there, have the safety rotate down the box, and they'll just close all the gaps and they'll get you, essentially. But as far as that's concerned, you're just looking at the players. And like I said, obviously Jim Schwartz wasn't given the most elite talent, but like I said, he also had control over some personnel. And you look at a lot of guys from his Detroit days and Buffalo Bills days, they were brought in as far as defense. You're talking about Darius Slay, Nigel Bradham, Haloti Ngata. You're talking about Ron Brooks. You're talking about dudes like, just look at all the investments they made in the defensive line. Timmy Jernigan, Chris Long, Michael Bennett, signed Fletcher Cox to a big deal, Brandon Graham, signing Javon Hargrave. Like, they've pumped a whole bunch of resources into the defensive line and not elsewhere. But the problem with that is when your defensive line doesn't get home, your secondary looks terrible. So then everybody that's not named Darius Slay is getting torched. Not Patrick Robinson. I was about to say the wrong guy. Nickel Roby-Coleman. You talk about Avonte Maddox, a 5'9" corner on the outside. So there's that. But then when you look at the Rams and you look at the dudes that have developed under them, they don't even have great linebackers. You can say the Rams have quote-unquote neglected the linebacker position. Their starting linebackers are Kenny Young and Micah Kiser. Like, they're not... But Brandon Staley knows how to utilize those guys and get the most out of them. You're talking about a 6th-round pick in Jordan Fuller, who's a starting safety next to John Johnson. You're talking about Darius Williams, who's an undrafted free agent, who, has looked like one of the best young corners in the league. So you look at the people they've developed under Brandon Staley and his defensive scheme, how adaptive it is as far as, the multiple fronts, combo coverages, 2 high shells, single high shells, shadowing opposing receivers, all that different stuff. And you look at what Jim Schwartz does: static cover 3, cover 1, use the front 4 to get pressure, don't send blitzes. It's just very vanilla. Like, there's no creativity to it on defense. There's no modern attack with his defensive approach. And so I feel like as far as what I described with Brandon Staley, and then you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, the Eagles can certainly do a lot better. I don't know where they're going to find a dude like Brandon Staley. Maybe poach someone off of Vic Fangio's coaching tree, perhaps, but I don't see that as likely. The Eagles are going to be probably conservative when they should be aggressive in pursuing some more modern ideas as far as their whole offensive and defensive structure is concerned. Obviously, I brought up Graham Harrell from college ranks. I'd be seeing about getting a younger defensive mind, someone, off of the Vic Fangio coaching tree. They're probably going to do an internal hire, which just doesn't wow me at all. It really disappoints me because they just don't bring in any fresh new ideas. It's just more of the same. And how can you expect change when you continuously promote internally and these dudes, they're Like, your coaching staff has already proven that they're not qualified enough to get the job done. If they're bringing anything to the table, we'd see some change, but we haven't. So there's that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all I got for you guys until I have more information about this whole Eagles situation. But there's so many layers to this, obviously, as you can see. Just so much has happened. This organization is just dysfunctional, disgraceful, and discombobulated. That's really all it comes down to. This organization, they've disgraced themselves. They've disgraced everything. They've lost so much credibility. And this team is the heart of the city. Not the Sixers, the Phillies. This team, they're the most popular sports team in the city. And they're the worst. And when they lose, the city it's not fun. It's just crazy that we've gone here 4 years after winning the Super Bowl. This is where we are. This team is dysfunctional. They have no young talent. The GM is not good at his job. The coach, I think he should have been fired. And I just don't see what's really going to change with these two still in the current infrastructure. And Jeffrey Lurie, he's just oblivious to it, obviously. He's oblivious to the fact of the problems. Maybe he just wants to keep them all together for the sense of comfortability and maybe just chalk it up to, it was a bad year, the pandemic, it was an anomaly. But this was not an anomaly. This was 2-3 years in the making. I said it. The previous team in 2018 started 4-6. The team last year on 2019 started 5-7. This team's 4-11-1 now. You have no young talent. The GM still is not good at his job, not good at drafting. You're way over the cap. Like, how could you make an argument that this is a functional franchise when they invited dysfunction and continued dysfunction? They have no winning culture, no winning mindset. They're just relying on the past to make decisions about the future instead of catching up with the league and the modern ideas of the league. They still haven't caught up. They're still behind. They're playing behind the 8-ball. And it's going to catch up to them. And they're going to, use Jim Schwartz and Carson Wentz as the scapegoat. And it's going to be funny when Carson Wentz looks like a star somewhere else once the Eagles trade him. And the Eagles are stuck in, purgatory because they made the wrong decisions. So, that's me. I'm still going to continue being a fan, of course. But I have no faith they can rectify this situation. I just don't. Not with Howie and Doug. I just don't believe in it anymore. Looking at this from a broader picture, I just don't see it. I really don't. Maybe they can get it fixed. Maybe they can get lucky again like they did in 2017. But I believe they're reaping what they've sown. That's what I believe. And I believe they're going to continue to do that until they do right. So until then, you guys know I'll be here. You guys know I'll be talking about it, unfortunately. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to hide. But until then, I appreciate you guys for listening. As always, Happy New Year. If you guys got any fan questions or anything like that, or even if you want to answer some of the questions I asked in this podcast, please, I'm happy to receive these answers and get a different look on it, but I just don't see it. But until then, I appreciate you guys for listening. One love as always. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.